Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to give you a glimpse inside the Rockler Plywood Challenge put on by the Modern Maker Podcast. So Ben, Mike, Chris, thank you guys for putting this on. Behind me, what you see here is a complete lumber rack made from one sheet of plywood. There's also a little desk and a shop stool as well. So guys, if you want to see how we did it, come join us and let's go. One sheet of plywood. What a great challenge, what a great contest. Rockler and Modern Maker, thanks again. We're gonna turn this bad boy into 3 different projects. Let's get right into it, let's go. Challenge underway, or should I say challenge accepted. So I'm taking this 4x8 foot sheet of plywood and I'm gonna break it down here on the table saw into 2 1/4 inch strips. First step is to lay out some of these strips. These are gonna be the brackets that are gonna be on the wall. There's gonna be 4 in total. This project is going to consist of layering layers of plywood together to create mortise and tenon joints. The marks I'm making here are going to be pieces that are going to be cut away, as you can see. I marked all 3 pieces, but then I figured I could probably just tape them together, take it to the crosscut sled, and then cut out all the pieces I need. This worked out really well. So here's an idea of how this is going to work. These are the middle pieces that are going to be sandwiched in between the left and right side of these brackets. As you can see here, I'm just kind of doing this by eye. I clamp them together to kind of give me a better feel for what I have, and everything looks like it's coming together pretty nice. With the wall brackets looking pretty good, with those mortises in place, we're gonna go ahead and cut these pieces that are gonna be hanging 90 degrees from those actual wall brackets, and the tenons are gonna be made from layering these plywood pieces together as well. So the plan was to use half of the sheet of plywood for the lumber rack, and the other half was going to be used for the shop stool and the desk. But I had to dip into the other half because I didn't have enough strips to make all the pieces I needed to make the cantilever 90-degree brackets that are going to be hanging from the wall. So here's everything I need. I'm going to explain how I assemble it. Okay, so what I've done so far, none of this has been permanently attached whatsoever. I've got essentially my brackets that are going to go up on the wall. They're clamped together here. I've got all these pieces cut out to make these cantilevered, if you will, mortise and tenon joints that we're going to make by just layering plywood together. So I've got 3 pieces here essentially, or 2 pieces on top of this one and 2 on top of this one as they sandwich them in between. And then of course, they're going to fit in just like that, but that's not quite enough strength for what we need. So I've cut these here. These are about 13 inches, and they are going to go, and they're going to be attached there. Now that void is there for a reason, and I'll explain why just in a minute. But this should work. So what we're going to do essentially is attach this piece there, and again attach another piece on the other side. So if I bring this out and hold it, essentially, roughly, this is what will go down onto each of these brackets, and that is super strong. How do I know? Well, I've done it before. My whole lumber rack over there is made with the same construction. This happens to be a little bit better version of what I've made in the past. So join me and let's get this done. All right, let's go. All right, with all those pieces cut, it's time for some assembly. Wood glue and brads are all I'm using to make this happen. As you can see here, I've made myself a jig here, which basically represents what's going to be on the wall. Not only does this make assembly a lot easier and faster, it gives me an idea of how it's going to work, and it looks great so far. Once I was happy with the first shelf that was made, it's time to get to work. This process took me roughly 30 or 40 minutes putting these shelves together. This little jig definitely came in handy, but I saw a baseball lying around and, well, why not have fun? This actually went onto my neighbor's roof, and I never got the ball back, quite honestly, but that's okay. Anyway, back to some assembly. This process, again, took me about 30 or 40 minutes, and it went pretty smoothly, as I'm very happy with how these turned out. After they're all completed, a little breaking of the edges with a sander is necessary because you don't want to have splinters, and now it's time to assemble the wall brackets. Here's a good look at all the pieces that go into what makes these wall brackets. As you can see, glue and brads, all you need. And I go ahead and have a test sacrificial piece that's gonna go in between, giving a nice tight fit. And I make my way down the line, just like so. As you can see here, this is the absolute cheater's way to make mortise and tenon joints, but hey, it works. The other piece gets layered right on top, and 1 bracket done, 2 more to go. Okay, in order to make these joints as tight as possible, the piece I use to make the wall bracket mortise is 1/1000th of an inch shorter or smaller than the actual tenons going inside, meaning that it is going to be a nice tight compression fit to the point where a hammer can't even get them all the way through. I had to enlist the help of some clamps to kind of shove those all the way down. And that is super strong. I was gonna put glue inside these, but it looked like I didn't need to. And eventually, once they get up on the wall, I reinforced with a couple of screws. But this right here turned out to be a super strong joint. So that's how I did it. All right, so the lumber rack is going right behind me. However, it looks like I gotta clean up a bit. So let's get that done. Much better. All right, let's go. Now it's time for some installation. We're gonna go ahead and mount a level cleat to the wall here, as this makes putting these things up so much easier later on. I'm gonna drill a 1/4-inch hole right through the center of each of these wall brackets, and then attach a lag screw all the way into the middle of the studs. As you can see there, they're resting on the cleat, making sure each one is level with each other. And this process goes pretty quickly. Just make sure they're level and you should be just fine. And for a little extra security, we're gonna go ahead and type a screw in from each side as well. Okay guys, we're halfway through this project, but I am more than halfway through my material. I have 3 feet left of the 8-foot span of this 4x8 foot sheet of plywood. But the guys at the Modern Maker Podcast, they're not too strict on what you use. So for the next part of this project, out of this, we're gonna incorporate some of this old, I think it's like seatbelt material, if you will. Found it at a garage sale a few years ago, and that is gonna come into play when we make our new shop stool. All right, let's get that done too. Well, you guessed it, guys. We're back to cutting strips and pieces again to make this shop stool, but first, I'm trying a new technique. Okay, so I wanna cut a very, very slight angle on this piece right here. So how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna take a stop block, or a clamp, if you will, but I need to essentially raise this up. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I need to raise it up on the sled to cut an angle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take either a nail, in this case I'm using an ice pick, and I'm just gonna tap it in place right there. That way, when I push it to the stop block, it doesn't necessarily rest back on the fence. There's a little bit of a gap, creating just a little bit of an angle, and that angle is gonna be very useful. Here we go. Now, I'm a little apprehensive to do this technique because I've never done it before, for one. And two, I've never seen it used in plywood. I've seen it used in hardwood before. But we're taking those angled pieces and we're gonna put the angles towards each other, essentially leaving us a tighter tolerance at one end and a looser tolerance at the other. And what that's gonna do is gonna create a gap for us to drive a wedge in between 2 pieces of wood, essentially cut on the bandsaw. You'll see all this in a second, but as I cut these pieces to size, you're gonna see me make the actual stretchers that are gonna go between the legs. And as I use glue and brads to assemble these, we're gonna drill a hole, essentially a relief hole, right in the middle at the base of each piece, take these pieces over to the bandsaw and cut that relief cut, giving us 2 individual pieces that are still joined by the same piece of wood. Now, I need some wedges cut out of plywood, of course, because it's a plywood challenge, and we're gonna use that same kind of technique here and cut these wedges out. Okay, kind of a moment of truth moment here in the project. So I've never tried this technique. I've seen it in various places. I've never seen it with plywood, but we're gonna try it. So essentially, these are the legs and these are the stretchers in between them. You can see there I've cut the kerf cut with a little bit of a relief hole that the drill provided, and the angle in which that these go in needs to be like that. Okay, creating a little bit of a gap there. So the wedges we just cut, which are right here, and then they go right inside this slot, which then expands these 2 pieces out into the relief, if you will, and we should have a super strong hold, but I don't know. I'm gonna bring you in here and we'll see how it works. All right, let's see if this works. I'm gonna start out by clamping the actual base piece onto the workbench to give me a little more stability. Then I'm gonna take that wedge, I'm gonna sand it down just a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the middle, and I'm gonna drive it home with a hammer. I'm a little apprehensive at this point, not sure if it's gonna work. It looks like it's doing okay. I'm gonna take it over to the disc sander, and I'm gonna go ahead and kind of sand off the waste material that was left behind, and I'm gonna do the other side. This way, I'm gonna give you a little bit better look at what's happening here. This wedge gets driven in the middle. We take a hammer and we slowly drive it in. And as you can see, the gap just closes right up and it creates a super strong hold. I didn't realize this was gonna work so well with plywood, but it did, and I'm so happy. And actually, believe it or not, the little grain pattern that I left, kind of a happy accident, looks really cool. They're kind of alternating. Didn't mean for that to happen either, but I'll take it. Now you saw I trimmed that joint with the disc sander. You also saw the flush trim saw as well. Either one will work, and you can also use a random orbit sander to kind of clean up the waste. A little mineral spirits to showcase that grain. Man, it's looking good. Now it's time to make the stretcher that's gonna go in between the legs for the shop stool. Now I wanted to make a big stately stretcher in between the legs here, but I don't have enough material, so I'm using spacer blocks to put a gap every other layer, saving on material because I don't have much left. As you can see, it turned out just fine. Now I need to cut some 5-inch squares here on the crosscut sled. I'm gonna take them over to the disc sander as well. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of create the edges, giving them a bevel, relieving the plywood layers, kind of giving it a cool aesthetic look to it, as you can see there. I need 4 of those in total. Those essentially are gonna help the big beam we just made attach itself to the right and left side of the shop stool. Using glue and brads at first, a little clamp to help me out, I make one, and then I attach the other. And you can see here, it's kind of a big stretcher piece that's gonna then marry the 2 pieces together. I go ahead and install some screws for extra security as well, break all the edges with some sanding, and now it's time to install it. I simply apply some glue to one side, apply it to the other. I go ahead and clamp it to one section, if you will, put the other section on, and I'm just gonna use my workbench to keep it level. And of course, you gotta use Rockler clamps. You know, why not? Once I get this all set up, I screw everything in place, and believe it or not, this thing is super strong. Just for added security, I'm gonna take another one of those lag screws and screw it through the leg into the beam, and we're in business. And what you see here is all the material I have left. I'm gonna cut one more strip, cut it in half, and then I'm gonna put some pocket holes in there. That way I can make a frame for the top of the shop stool. That way I have something to attach the seatbelt material that I mentioned earlier to. Now it's time to break all the edges on the frame we just made, and here's some of the seatbelt material. I've been saying seatbelt this whole time, but it more or less is like ratchet strap material. The length I need is measured by these 2 pieces of blue tape, making quick work of how many pieces I need to cut. Multiple lengths from one y-axis to the x-axis, if you will. And here we go. We're gonna start attaching these with some staples, and this process goes pretty quickly. You attach one section all the way across, and then you're gonna turn it 90 degrees and lay out the others and attach each one of these into the frame all the way down. And now here comes the fun part. At this point, we're gonna create a basket weave pattern, which is gonna give us a super strong seat here. Essentially, the first strap, if you go over the first and under the second, the next one, you're gonna go under the first and over the second, alternating layers. As you can see here, it kind of creates a cool checkerboard effect, and this is gonna be a super strong hold. Now, the last few straps here, I'm just hand tightening this whole thing and stapling it as I go, and it turned out absolutely great. Looks awesome. Now, here are some inline skate casters that I've had for 5 or 7 years. And finally, this is a great project to use them, and I'm gonna go ahead and install them just like this with some Craig pinhead screws. Now, I'm gonna take 4 of these leftover scrap blocks and drill 2 pocket holes in them. I'm gonna attach them to the remaining pieces of plywood that I have, and I'm gonna go ahead and attach 2 drawer slides to them as well. Now that void is there for a reason, and I'll explain why just in a minute. So those scrap pieces that I screwed into those stretchers, they're gonna go up into those voids, creating an area to give me these drawer slides, which is gonna be a nice little desk area to put the laptop on whenever I'm doing any type of digital fabrication at the CNC. As you can see here, I made a quick frame out of plywood. I didn't have enough plywood to make a total desk, so I'm having to resort to using that same ratchet strap material, and I've gone ahead and I've cut these pieces to length, and I'm gonna go ahead and tack them on with the same staples I used earlier and use the same type of basket weave pattern I used as well. As you can see here, the process is the same, it's just on a smaller scale. And by not having enough material, it had me think outside the box yet once again, and this is what we came up with. So to mimic a flat surface, if you will, I'm actually taking a pair of these kind of pliers or nippers, if you will, and I'm grabbing the material, helping it stretch even further, and using my staple gun just like that, and this thing looks awesome. Well, here you go, guys. At a glance, here are all 3 projects made from one sheet of plywood, and we think it turned out fantastic. What's left is to load it up. I'm gonna put these cedar slabs at the top. I've got a couple projects planned for those, so look out for those in the future. We're gonna keep pieces of plywood at the bottom and maybe some hardwoods there in the middle, and I think that's gonna work out pretty well. Also, here is a final look at the project, and I couldn't be happier with it. Hey guys, thank you for joining us for this one. This was an absolute blast to build, and I don't think I've stretched one sheet of plywood this far probably ever. So Ben, Mike, and Chris, thanks for putting this on. Rockler, thank you as well. And if you want to join us in subscribing, it's right over here, and also we'll have more videos for you over there. And if you want to help support us, we have a link down below for the Patreon account. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. You want to say it? You want to say it? Episode. Guys, thanks again. We'll see you next time.